She shouted across the dirt road like she owned the place. "You can't block the entrance. This is community property," she barked, waving a clipboard that looked more official than it was. I stared at her through the metal gate I'd built with my own hands, the land deed folded in my jacket pocket. It wasn't even an HOA neighborhood, just wide open country, 5 acres of peace I bought after my wife passed. I wanted silence, but Karen wanted control. That morning I'd noticed a line of buses crawling down the gravel road, engines rumbling like a storm. 10 of them. When the first one stopped, strangers poured out with folding chairs, coolers, and banners that read HOA Community Fun Fair. I thought it was a joke, but then one man started hammering a tent stake into my grass. My grass. I stepped out from the barn and yelled, "You're on private property." But they just looked at me confused, saying, "Karen told us this was the community park." Karen strutted up, sunglasses flashing, that fake smile plastered on her face. "This area is under the HOA's event zone. Didn't you get the notice?" she said, holding out a paper with the HOA logo printed in blurry ink. I laughed, and it wasn't even our HOA. "Lady, I don't have an HOA, I said slowly. "This land's been private since 1972. You're trespassing." Her smile vanished. "You think you can just say that and keep people out?" "This community listens to me," she snapped her fingers, and a few men moved closer like they were taking orders. I could feel my chest tightening, anger mixing with disbelief. She leaned toward me, whispering, "If you touch that gate, I'll have every one of them call the sheriff and say you threatened us." That's when I realized this wasn't about a fair. It was about power. She wanted to humiliate me, to prove that I didn't belong even on my own land. I didn't argue. I walked back toward the gate, pretending to give up. Karen smirked, turning to direct her volunteers deeper into my field. But when the last bus rolled in and the tires crossed the gate line, I pressed the remote in my pocket. With a heavy clank, the steel gate swung shut behind them, locking all 10 buses, 24 strangers and one furious Karen inside my property. Her face went pale. What do you think you're doing?" she shouted. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Just protecting my land. You wanted your community fair? Now you can explain it to the sheriff when he gets here." Her hands trembled, the clipboard slipping to the ground. For the first time, she looked unsure. But deep down I knew, this was just the beginning. Viral line of Section 1. "You wanted your community fair? Now you can explain it to the sheriff when he gets here." Karen froze for a moment, glancing back at the locked gate as the sound of the latch echoed through the field. The people she brought started murmuring, confused and uneasy. One man said, "Wait, this isn't the park." Another woman added, "Karen, you said this was the new HOA property." Karen snapped, "It is. He's just squatting here. He doesn't even belong in this community." She pointed at me like I was some criminal. I could see her mask slipping, panic showing through her fake confidence. I didn't move an inch. I just leaned against the fence, calm, letting her talk herself into a hole. "Ma'am," I said, my voice steady, "this isn't your community. And for the record, this land's been mine since before your HOA ever existed." She huffed, storming closer until she was inches from me. "You think you're clever, don't you? You're going to regret this. I know the county inspector personally," she said, pulling out her phone like a weapon. "I can have your permits checked, your property flagged, and your gate torn down by noon." I smiled slightly. "You can try," I said, "but make sure you call the real inspector this time, not your little friend who prints fake letters." Her eyes widened just enough to tell me I hit a nerve. The crowd was listening now, whispering among themselves. Someone even pulled out their phone, recording everything. Karen noticed it too late. Desperate, she started yelling, "He's dangerous! He locked us in! Someone call 911! Her voice cracked halfway through the scream, and I almost felt sorry for her, almost. I crossed my arms. "You told them this was your land," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Why would I lock you out of something you own?" A man from one of the buses spoke up. "Lady, you better be telling the truth. I brought my kids here." Another woman joined in. "You dragged us here for your HOA thing? This isn't even the right place?" Karen's voice trembled. "He's lying. He's dangerous. Before she could finish, I heard the distant sound of sirens. She turned to me, smiling again, that smug grin crawling back. "See, that's the sheriff. You're finished." But she didn't know what I knew. The sheriff wasn't coming because of her call. He was coming because of mine. I'd already sent him the drone footage, her trespassing, organizing the buses, and setting up fake HOA notices. I looked at her calm as ever and said, "Karen, you just called the real cops to your own trap. Viral line of Section 2. You just called the real cops to your own trap." The sirens grew louder, bouncing off the open field as everyone turned toward the road. Karen straightened her posture and fixed her hair, pretending she was in charge again. "Everyone stay calm," she shouted. "I'll handle this. He's the trespasser here, and I'll make sure the sheriff knows it." The buses idled quietly, heat waves shimmering off the metal. Kids peeked out the windows, confused. Parents looked around, worried they'd been dragged into something ugly. I stood still, watching dust rise from the approaching patrol trucks. 2 of them, lights flashing red and blue. Karen marched forward to meet them before they'd even stopped. "Officers!" she yelled, pointing at me dramatically. "That man's holding us hostage on private property." The first deputy stepped out, squinting at her. "Hostage?" he repeated. "Ma'am, you sure about that?" "Yes," she barked. "He locked the gate, trapped us all in. I'm the HOA president, and he's refusing to let anyone leave." I could almost feel the heat of her desperation. I didn't interrupt. I just reached into my jacket, slow and calm, and pulled out a thick brown envelope. "Sheriff," I said as he approached, "before you believe her, you might want to look at what's in here." He took the envelope and flipped it open. Inside were printed drone photos, time-stamped, showing Karen's group unloading from the buses, hammering stakes into my grass, and even Karen herself putting up a fake community event banner. Karen's face went blank. That's fake," she stammered. "He made that." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, these are time-stamped from this morning, and that's your vehicle in every frame." She took a step back, her voice cracking. "You don't understand. This land used to be under HOA regulation." The sheriff looked at me. I nodded slightly. "It never was. I bought it directly from the county 5 years ago. Got the deed notarized and everything." He turned to her again. "Ma'am, unless you can show me paperwork proving this property belongs to your HOA, I'm going to have to ask why you organized a public event here without the owner's permission." Her lips trembled. Because he doesn't belong here. He never attends meetings, never signs our notices, never." The sheriff cut her off. "That's because he's not in your HOA." The crowd behind the gate started laughing softly, whispering things like, "She's done, and can you believe this?" Karen's face turned red, then pale. I walked closer, stopped a few feet from her, and said quietly, "You should have just knocked on the door instead of bringing 10 buses." She glared at me, eyes full of hate. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I smiled faintly. "Funny," I said. I was about to say the same thing. Viral line of Section 3, funny. I was about to say the same thing. Karen's glare burned through me, but I could see her confidence slipping like sand through her fingers. The sheriff gestured toward the crowd. "Folks, go ahead and stay near your buses. We'll get this cleared up." He turned to me quietly. "Sir, you okay with unlocking that gate so they can leave?" I nodded, pressing the button in my pocket. The heavy steel gate rolled open with a deep groan. The crowd began shuffling toward their buses, embarrassed and muttering under their breath. One man whispered to another, "She's never running another HOA event again." Another woman pulled her kids closer, shaking her head. Karen didn't move. She stood frozen, staring at the sheriff's truck, probably trying to figure out how to spin this. "Sheriff," she said, her tone suddenly sweet, "maybe we can handle this privately. He's new around here. He doesn't understand how our community works." The sheriff looked unimpressed. "Ma'am, from what I'm seeing, this man owns his property fair and square. You can't claim HOA control where there isn't any." Her fake smile twitched. "I think you're misunderstanding the bigger picture. I've worked with local officials for years. We maintain order here. Without me, this neighborhood—" I interrupted her. "Without you, people might actually live in peace." Her face turned bright red. "You're crossing a line," she snapped. "You think you can embarrass me in front of everyone and get away with it?" The sheriff sighed. "Ma'am, you've already done that yourself." He held up the envelope again. "We'll keep this evidence for our report. If you or your group return here, it'll be considered criminal trespassing." Karen clenched her fists, eyes darting toward the camera phone still recording. You think this video's going to make you some kind of hero? She spat. People will forget you by next week. I leaned closer, my voice low but firm. Maybe, but you'll never forget today. She stared at me, speechless for the first time since I'd met her. Then, with a shaky breath, she turned and stomped toward her car. The buses followed one by one, tires crunching over gravel as they rolled out. The sheriff gave me a nod and said quietly, "You handled that better than most would have." "Had to," I replied. "People like her. They think power comes from paper, but it really comes from truth." The sheriff smiled faintly. "That's a good way to put it." He climbed back into his truck and drove off, leaving behind silence. The kind of silence I'd bought this land for in the first place. But as the dust settled and I turned toward my porch, I saw something half buried near the gate, a folder, dropped from Karen's car. My name was written on it, and right beneath my name, it said in bold letters, "Pending HOA acquisition proposal. Viral line of Section 4. People like her think power comes from paper, but it really comes from truth." I picked up the folder carefully, brushing off the dirt. The words on the cover sent a chill down my spine. Pending HOA acquisition proposal. Inside were printed blueprints stamped with county logos, and a signed application, Karen's signature, bold and messy across the bottom. Each page laid out a plan. The HOA was attempting to expand its jurisdiction, merging nearby land and including mine and under its control. They called it a community development upgrade. My property was highlighted in red, labeled target lot, so that was it. The buses, the fake notices, the threats, all of it wasn't about a fair. It was about forcing me to become part of her HOA. She wanted to trap me into compliance by making it look like I was already involved. I felt my jaw tighten as I flipped through more pages. She'd even attached letters of resident consent with fake signatures. Neighbors who didn't even live here anymore. One of the letters had my late wife's name forged on it. That's when I stopped breathing for a second. My wife's name. I stood there staring at it, my hands trembling with anger. She'd crossed every line. This wasn't just harassment, it was personal. Before I could think twice, I dialed the sheriff's number again. "Yeah, it's me," I said quietly. "You might want to turn around. I found something you'll want to see." 20 minutes later, his truck pulled back onto the property. He stepped out, hat low, eyes narrowing as I handed him the folder. He flipped through it, his expression hardening with every page. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "This is fraud. Full-on document forgery. Can you press charges?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Not just trespassing this time. This is serious. Forgery, fraud, maybe even intent to defraud the county. She's going to have a hard time explaining this." A small sense of relief settled in, but under it, I felt something heavier, resolve. Karen wanted control and she nearly got it. But now it was time to take back everything she'd tried to steal. I looked toward the road where she'd driven off earlier, the sunset painting the sky in red and orange. "She played dirty," I said quietly. "But she forgot one thing." The sheriff looked at me. "What's that?" I met his eyes. "I keep every camera rolling." He smiled just a little. "Then I guess she just wrote her own confession. Viral line of Section 5. She played dirty, but she forgot one thing: I keep every camera rolling." That night, I sat on my porch under the soft hum of the crickets, the folder still open beside me. The moonlight hit those forged papers, and I couldn't stop thinking about my wife's name written there. The same woman who used to sit on this porch and say, "We finally found peace here." Karen tried to steal that peace, but now, it was time to end this for good. The next morning, I met the sheriff again at the county building. He'd already contacted the district attorney. "She's being called in for questioning today," he told me. "We've got the footage, the drone files, and your deed verified by the recorder's office." "You did good, sir." I just nodded. "I didn't do it for pride," I said quietly. "I did it so no one else gets bullied by her again." By noon, the news spread faster than wildfire. Clips of Karen screaming at the buses, yelling at the sheriff, and waving fake papers were all over social media. People from nearby towns shared it, tagging things like HOA Karen and Property Rights Matter. The video hit 1 million views in hours. That afternoon, as I drove back home, I saw her standing outside the HOA office, surrounded by reporters. Her perfect hair was a mess, her hands shaking as she tried to explain herself. "It was a misunderstanding," she said into the cameras. He forged my name." But the reporters weren't buying it. The sheriff stepped up behind her, calm as ever, holding the same folder I'd given him. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm, "you're under arrest for trespassing, document forgery, and filing false property claims." Her face went white as the cameras clicked. For once, she had nothing to say. I parked down the road, watching quietly as they led her to the patrol car. The same woman who had screamed that I didn't belong here was now being taken away from the same road she tried to own. When I got home, I walked to the gate and touched the metal. The land was quiet again, peaceful. I could almost hear my wife's voice in the wind, soft but proud. "You did the right thing." I looked up at the sky, then down at the gate that started it all, and said to myself, I didn't fight for this land just to let someone take it with a clipboard. As the sun set, golden light spread across the fields, my fields, and for the first time in a long while it felt like freedom again. Final viral line. "I didn't fight for this land just to let someone take it with a clipboard." End of story.